Hi, Googlers, and hi, YouTube. I'm Aditya Prasad, and I'm a software engineer in the Maps team. And in my 20% time, I help out with personal growth initiatives at Google. So first, I'd like to remind everyone here that May is Personal Growth Month in New York City. You can find out more at the Go link, go/PGNY. There's tons of resources. I'll be teaching a course, an introductory course in meditation and awareness for anyone who is new to the field. But today, on behalf of the Authors at Google series, I'm proud to present Dr. Deepak Chopra.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Chopra.
Thank you.
So it's been said that if Dr. Chopra were to marry his close personal friend Oprah Winfrey, she would become Oprah Chopra.
I mentioned that on her site, and she did not appreciate it.
Well, then we'll cut that from this video. But all joking aside, we're delighted to have Dr. Chopra here today. He's world-renowned as an expert in matters of spirituality and mind-body medicine, and millions of people look up to him for guidance. He's authored dozens of books, many of them bestsellers, and most recently he's published a book, Spiritual Solutions, Answers to Life's Greatest Challenges. So, Dr. Chopra, I'd love to ask you a few questions about your book and, in general. And after about halfway through the hour, we're going to open up the questions to the audience. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
Great. So, first of all, a warm welcome. How are you finding Google New York City?
I've been here before,
Yeah?
and I think it's a great space. In the language of the audience, it's cool.
Have you gotten lost yet?
I never get lost.
Oh, that's fantastic. Most of us get lost all the time, so that is wonderful. So I want to know, so having published so many other works, so many wonderful works, what was your main motivation or goal or inspiration for this particular book?
To reach the audience that we're speaking to right now, because my audience is already on board with the idea that spirituality is awareness, it's consciousness. I think many of the people who are new to the word spirituality associate it with religion or dogma or ideology or self-righteous morality, which is just jealousy with a halo. When I use the word spirit or spirituality, I mean awareness. And awareness has many components, which we can talk about as we proceed.
Fantastic. So you would say that your audience primarily for this book is people who are new to the ideas of
people who are
and
new to the ideas of spirituality. Scientists once again, because
Okay.
I have a constant kind of battle with scientists. And we can talk about that too.
Sure.
So I decided to change tactics for a while.
Okay, so this is mostly for, this crowd is largely scientific, as you must know. So this may speak particularly well to this audience.
Yeah, this is an audience of technologists. I wouldn't necessarily call them scientists.
Sure. Think we have a mix?
Okay.
So one thing is, in this book, you talk about the usefulness of, when addressing a problem, instead of addressing it from what you call the level of the problem, you advocate addressing it from a place of expanded awareness. And so I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about what the difference between these two might be.
Good. So let me start out with something that you will be very familiar with, okay? Because all of you deal with information, in a sense. When my wife was pregnant with our first child, Malika, who's sitting in the audience, my chief resident called me and he said, I just took your wife's blood sample and it shows a thalassemia minor trait. So I went and looked at the blood sample, and sure enough, the cells were not what you see normally. It took me 2 days to go to the library to track where I could find that information. And then I was in New Jersey, then I had to go to the public library in New York, and it took me another 2 days. And what I discovered was very exciting, and that is that blood trait existed along the exact route that the armies of Alexander the Great took in 323 BC from Greece, from Macedonia to India. That the trait, and of course I told my wife, it seems like your ancestors were screwing around. But it took me 5 days to get that information. Today I could go to Google and take me less than a minute. I'd get to some sites and then from there go to other sites, and in a minute I'd have that information. So what does information do? Information expands our awareness of what is. Okay? And so through the Google network, which is the biggest search engine, we expand our awareness. But there's another thing that people don't understand. Our state of awareness actually chooses the information that we seek out. Okay? So if my state of awareness says, I want to understand the causes of war, terrorism, global warming, social injustice, economic injustice, all the things that are kind of surfacing now as what's happening in Syria and all the Middle East, the so-called Arab Spring, Occupy Wall Street, then my state of awareness, looking at this global picture, will seek out the right information. Okay, so they co-feed on each other. The information expands awareness, but the state of awareness also expands the information we seek.
Sure.
And if by awareness I mean spirituality, which is my definition, then awareness has many more components than information. Awareness influences your moods. So, if you're depressed, then everything looks dark and bleak. It influences your beliefs. It influences your assumptions. It influences your perceptions. It influences your expectations. So in the book, my thesis is that all problems exist because of what I call contracted awareness. Okay, contracted awareness means you feel separate from the ecosystem. The Google network is an ecosystem. So you feel separate from the ecosystem that nurtures the web of relationships. And that then, of course, results in fear, in anxiety, in expectations that are doomsday prophecies, in assumptions that everything is going to go wrong, and so on and so forth. So in my mind, the analogy is you're walking in a dark room and you have a candle, that's the light of your awareness, and you keep bumping into stuff. And so everything is a problem. And that's your world. But now imagine that you can expand that candle's light of awareness. So now you have a flashlight. And you can move around, and everything that seemed like an obstacle actually has a purpose. This has a purpose. This has a purpose. That screen has a purpose. So all problems are now opportunities for some purpose. So that's expanded awareness. You now feel connected to the web of relationships, the network of relationships, which is exactly what Google is. It's a network of relationships. Okay? So I like to use the Google example here. But then imagine another state, which I call pure awareness. It's called pure awareness in Eastern wisdom traditions. And here now you're in the same room, but all the walls are transparent glass, and the room, including the ceiling and the floor, and the room is flooded with sunlight, and you look outside and the whole world is your playground. There are no problems, and therefore no need for solutions. You are the creative evolutionary impulse of the universe. And so you play. You're in flow. Every situation is a conspiracy of the total universe. And so the thesis of my book is problems arise in contracted awareness. Solutions emerge automatically in expanded awareness. And then when you have pure awareness, which is awareness without boundaries, no conceptual boundaries, then it's pure creativity. That's the basis of this book. And you can apply these principles. You don't even actually have to read the book if you understand the principles. You can apply these principles whether you want material success, want to improve the quality of your relationships, want to have an understanding of insight, intuition, imagination, creativity, inspiration, which is spirituality, higher consciousness, or whether you want to solve mundane, easy problems. Nobody's addressing the problems at a higher state of awareness than the awareness that created the problems. And that quote of mine is from Einstein. He said, no problem can ever be solved at the level of awareness at which it was created. It's a long answer.
Fantastic.
But it's the summary of the book.
So then let me ask you, I find it also easier to speak of awareness using analogies because it's sometimes hard to speak about directly. But if I'm trying to understand whether I'm approaching a problem from the perspective of contracted or expanded awareness, how can I be sure, or what objective signs do I have to know that I'm in a place of expanded awareness?
Your body language shows it. Okay, a baby can read body language before a baby learns language. So if you're in contracted awareness, your posture, first of all, is depressed. Your eyes are shifty. You have a skull on your face. You're contracted in general. You're probably constipated as well because you have tight sphincters everywhere. Your blood pressure is up. Your heart rate is speeded up. And everything is a problem. Your beliefs reflect that. Expectations reflect that. Assumptions reflect that. Perceptions reflect that. Everything is bleak. So when a baby looks at its mother, if the mother is in contracted awareness, the baby immediately goes into contracted awareness because her voice tone and all the things I mentioned, body language reflect that. And baby has there's a phenomenon called mirror neurons. That's how we learn even regular language, but that's how we learn emotional language as well. If the mother smiles, let's say the baby falls down, the mother screams and is getting upset and contracted, the baby will look at that situation with fear.
Sure.
If the mother smiles and says, oh, you fell down, and her tone reflects that, her body language reflects that, she has a smile, the baby interprets that same situation in a different way. So you can read anyone's awareness just by looking at them. And even dogs can do it, by the way. Animals can do it. They read your state of awareness just by looking at you.
So if I wanted to expand my awareness, one way of doing it seems to be to take spiritual problems and address the spiritual solutions to those problems. Is there a more direct way of doing it?
Here's the most direct way. Remember, I said to every situation you bring your awareness, and that includes moods and feelings, expectations, assumptions, perceptions, and beliefs. Okay, those are the components of awareness. So when you are seeing a problem, any problem, just take my word for it, you're in contracted awareness. And you need to shift that. Okay, and how do you shift that? There are many ways to shift that. First of all, you can sit down, just stop at that moment, recognize that you're in contracted awareness, and expand your awareness. What do I mean, expand your awareness? Establish a connection with the web of relationships around you. One way to do it is feel gratitude. And what does that mean? Just count the things that you're already grateful for, notwithstanding the problems you're in. Gratitude moves your ego out of the way, connects you to the people and situations and circumstances that you're grateful for. Forgiveness is another way. Forgiveness means letting go of resentments and grievances, because in every state of contracted awareness, that's an ingredient. Resentment, grievance. And Nelson Mandela said that having a grievance is like drinking poison and hoping it'll kill your enemy. It doesn't work. Okay, it's hurting yourself, it's throwing you into contraction. So those are the first two things. And then there are other things. You can remember an experience of love. Everyone's had that experience, whether it's instinctive love, protecting a child, or it's emotional, romantic love, or what we call spiritual love. So remember an experience of love that evokes feelings of compassion, empathy, joy, equanimity, what we call platonic values, truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, evolution. So by remembering that, or even imagining that, let's shift your awareness. Then what you can do is now see how immediately that changes your mood, that changes your beliefs. First the belief was everything is a problem. Now you're seeing more context, relationship. You're going beyond win-lose orientation. You're seeing that the world is relational and holistic and ultimately an ecosystem where everything is interdependent. And then you can go beyond that. You can go beyond expanded awareness into what I call pure awareness, and that is going into the silence. This is a tough one, but it's achievable. Going into the silence between your thoughts. Okay, between every thought there's a little space, and that's where there is no thought. So right now, as you're listening to me, just turn your attention to who's listening. So as you're listening to me, be aware of the listener. That still presence that you feel, that's pure awareness. It's not your mind, which might be saying, I wish I'd gone to the bathroom before I came here, or why didn't my girlfriend return my call, or whatever. That's the mind. But between the spaces between thoughts is just pure awareness. That's the place of infinite creativity. Anything, it's the field of all possibilities. Creativity, intention. It's also a place of ambiguity and uncertainty, because without ambiguity and uncertainty, there's no creativity. So the space between our thoughts is a field of possibilities. It's a field of creativity. It's the place where our intentions come from. And it's also the place of uncertainty. You embrace uncertainty. That's the place where you want to be, even more than expanded awareness.
That's fantastic. I know a lot of modern science, in particular positive psychology, is definitely validating a lot of these ideas and helping come up with actual practices which have been known forever but are finally being validated. And there will be more talk of this during Personal Growth Month. There will be many more opportunities to learn about it. So I think that's fantastic. I wanted to say also, the final page of your book really connected with me for a particular reason. In there, you explain that one of the most important reasons that you speak about spiritual solutions is that it's a practical way to incorporate spirituality into life. And that since we no longer live in an age of faith, we may risk losing touch with some of these deep connections. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, the age of faith, the age of religion all began with a spiritual experience. So, and what is a spiritual experience? In short, I've outlined it from contracted to expanded and to pure. But when you look at all the religions, they all have a few principles. The first principle is transcendence, which is going beyond space-time and causality, getting in touch with something that is eternal, transcendent, that is almost inexplicable, but you feel that that's real, okay? Second is that the emergence from that experience of the interconnectedness of life as an ecosystem. So from that truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, love, compassion, joy, equanimity, which the Buddha calls divine attitudes, but they're there in every religion. And the third experience from all religion is the experience of the loss of fear of death, because you've touched something that is beyond both birth and death, being transcendent. That's the basis of all religion and faith. But what people do is they institutionalize this, they make it a dogma, an ideology, and then it becomes a belief system, which is another word for a cover-up for insecurity. I believe that all belief is a cover-up for insecurity. You only believe in things that you really want to be convinced of but are not. If I told you, do you believe in electricity, you say it's obvious, right? We were using it. So belief is a cover-up for insecurity. So in today's age, we need a secular spirituality that's based on understanding, that's based on science, and that's based on experience. And that was what I meant in that last sentence.
That makes a lot of sense. That's what I took from it too. So I wanted to ask you also, you've already touched on this earlier, but about the role of technology with spirituality. So this is kind of a two-part thing. First, since we're a technology company, I think some of us might be interested in understanding how spirituality and technology may interface. For example, how may technological tools assist in deepening spirituality, and vice versa? How may spirituality inform technological progress? And then the second part is, how might it relate to Google? Are there specific Google products you see that may help, or can we do a better job?
You can do a better job, and I'll tell you how.
Fantastic.
But
that's what I wanted to hear.
I'm the biggest fan of technology. I think God finally got whatever that mystery is that we call God. Got frustrated, and I said, I better use technology. So, technology is the latest incarnation of consciousness. And as I said, I'm a big fan. I have this little thing, this little gizmo that's right now monitoring everything that's happening in my body. I have another one here in my pocket that does similar things. I can USB these things and put them in a cloud and compare how my body is doing with,
wow,
or my state of awareness is doing with other people that I'm in contact with in the cloud. Okay, and so here's the future. All the things that we've spoken of in Eastern wisdom traditions are now subject to technological innovation. I'm working here with someone right in the audience, and in a few months we'll have a little gizmo that you can tune in if you want into deep sleep, dream state, or any other fantasy that you will.
Where can we learn more about this?
I'll Google it. Okay? I'll post it on YouTube. But here's the future. Technology future is you should be able to regulate what's happening in your body, in your mind, in your emotions by watching something on a monitor and then shifting your state of awareness.
So biofeedback?
And biofeedback, I prefer the word bioregulation.
Okay.
Okay, so bioregulation, because not only biofeedback is getting the information. Now, what do we do with it is bioregulation.
Okay.
So far, Google is into the age of information. The next step for Google is the age of knowledge. And knowledge, what's the difference between knowledge and information? Knowledge is information that can be put to use, divine or diabolical. We can use knowledge to cause a nuclear plant to leak or interfere with air traffic signals with this, or shut off a pacemaker, or whatever else you want to do, you'll be able to do with this little thing.
Sure.
Cut off electricity in New York. So knowledge can be diabolical, destructive. Knowledge can be divine, constructive, create a peaceful, just, sustainable, and healthy and happy world. And you can do that. That's what Google can do. And move from the information age into the age of knowledge, and move from the age of knowledge to the age of wisdom. A wisdom-based civilization using social networks as the neural networks of a global brain, and ultimately a cosmic brain. That's the future of technology.
Great. So before we turn over the questions to the audience, I wanted to ask you just one final question. So I noticed in this book that in contrast to some of your earlier works, that you avoided using some maybe quasi-scientific terminology like quantum healing, which may have appeared in your previous books. And I'm wondering, is that based on feedback that such terms may confuse some of your readership, or was it for a different reason?
It's very interesting history. When I use the word quantum healing, and I was, in my mind, using it very legitimately, okay? And I got attacked by all the scientists. In fact, I got the Ig Nobel Prize. Do you know about that? The Nobel Prize for Ignorance. Okay? And I was attacked by scientists. And so I backed off a little bit because I was convinced about the terminology I was using, but I'm not a quantum physicist. So, I was being criticized by quantum physicists, so I said back off a little bit.
Okay.
But then in the last 3 years, I started holding a conference at my center through our nonprofit. We call it Sages and Scientists. So I'd bring in all the skeptics, I'll bring in all the people who are interested in consciousness. And I suddenly found that there was a bunch of really high-level scientists, including Nobel laureates, not Ig Nobel laureates, but Nobel laureates who were closet spiritual consciousness adherents.
Sure.
And I said, let me bring them out of the closet. Let me out them.
Yeah.
And so I started to do that. And so recently what I've started to do is I started to post those conversations with them on YouTube.
Fantastic.
And we're getting a lot of good feedback and still a lot of attack. Last week, in a physics journal, Nature Physics, there was a scientific paper by this guy Zeilinger and about retrograde causation. And I've spoken about it 30 years from today, because it's all there in the wisdom tradition. So this time I said, instead of me writing a blog about it and posting it on the Chronicle and Huffington and YouTube and all this, I'll get a computational physicist to co-author with it. With it. So I wrote the article. I got a computational physicist in quantum physics to co-author it. He made a few changes technically. And now it's the buzz. It's in the physics community.
Zeilinger is quite popular in that
we've come back
field.
full circle to quantum healing, and I feel validated.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, that's a great finish to my questions. So now I think we have time for audience questions. So there are 2 mics here and here, and if people have questions, please feel free to come on up. I think everyone's shy.
Do you want me to give you the questions or not?
Alternatively, if there are things that I haven't covered during my questions,
You've covered
if you
a
feel
lot.
like
You know, since time immemorial, people have asked these questions. Who am I? What do I really want? What's my real identity? Do I have a soul? What happens to me after death? Does God exist? And if so, what's he, she, it doing about me personally? These have been answered through religion, but as you recognize now that most of religion, although based on experience and legitimate experience, is still cultural mythology. So we need a new framework, and that framework can only come through science and technology. And I think for the first time, we may be able to address these same questions that human beings have asked for a long time through a new state of awareness. Yes, sir.
Hi. When you were speaking about being in the room in the dark with a candle, and then moving from there to having the room have glass walls and glass ceiling, I was thinking of a chicken and egg problem. I don't spend a lot of time sitting in the cancer ward holding people's hands, or going and feeding the homeless. Not because I don't care, but because I find it so overwhelming that I cannot fix those problems. And so the idea of suddenly having this global awareness of everything that's going on is rather terrifying. And I don't think that that's what you're talking about. So I was wondering if you could address how those 2 things fit together.
Yes, it's a very important question, because in the last 1 year, we've hosted at our studio here, Deepak Home Base, which is a few blocks from here. I've hosted people who speak about climate chaos and the fact that in the last 3 years, there were 40 million climate refugees in the world that most people don't even know about. Okay, that new epidemics like malaria killing a child per minute, that 50% of the world lives on less than $2 a day, 20% on less than $1 a day. That there's going to be water wars in the next 10 years. And every time you speak to one of these experts, they're correct. When you look, I mean, we've got like 50 years to, at most 100 years, to repair our ecosystem before we go extinct. Literally, extinction. You know, if insects disappeared from our planet today, life would flourish in 5 years. If human beings disappeared from our planet, life would flourish. If insects disappeared, life would disappear. So, you know, as far as the ecosystem is concerned, every form of life is more nurturing to the planet than us humans. And your question is, this becomes overwhelming. You know, I worry about my grandkids when they grow up. What's going to happen? So either you can say, give up, or you can say, we have the technology right here, and Google is a good example of that, to actually not only expand awareness, but to take that feeling that we have of love and compassion for the rest of life on our planet and take action. Because for every one of these problems, there's a solution. For every one of these problems, whether it's climate change, whether it's the ecosystem, whether it's water shortage, whether it's energy depletion or oil, there are creative solutions. There are special interest groups that will prevent that from happening. Today, if all wars ceased in the world, the US economy would sink. If today we had a cure for cancer, the medical industrial complex would have huge problems. Cancer is a huge business with CAT scans and technology and chemotherapy. That's how we make money. I'm a physician, I know how we make money. Every time you do something, even if it's harmful, you get paid. So the only solution to this is a critical mass of humanity saying enough, and we want to take action. That's not going to come from institutions. It's not even going to come from academia. It's going to come through collective consciousness. I don't know why, in my mind, I thought if 100 million people, and that's why I'm here at Google, if 100 million people committed to personal transformation, not even social transformation, personal transformation, the world would be transformed because we are the world. What's happening out there is a projection of our consciousness. There's no social transformation in the absence of personal transformation. So that's where I'm hanging my bets. And if it doesn't happen, I'll be gone anyway.
So your comment about quantum healing reminded me of something that I read about, a phenomena that I read about that I wanted to hear your thoughts on. I read a book a couple years ago called Measuring the Immeasurable. And it was about how people could influence each other through some phenomena that's not measurable in current scientific methods. So what they had is they had people in different rooms where especially if they knew each other, if the person thought about the other person during a given moment of time, you could actually measure response on the epidermis. Like you could measure nervous activity. So the humans were somehow influencing each other. And so this was like one of the first pieces of scientific evidence that there's some sort of connection between humans that goes beyond, the physical or the verbal or whatever. So I was wondering, is this somehow related to what you mean when you talk about quantum healing? And also, are you aware of this phenomenon, and do you believe in it, and do you know of more evidence?
Okay, so there are two questions. First of all, quantum healing. No, quantum healing is a very simple idea. It means that when you get to your baseline status, your pure awareness, your body goes into homeostasis, which is self-regulation. We're all born with self-regulation as a given, and that's in medical language, we call that homeostasis. It's a dynamic state of non-change within the change. So we all have that capacity. That's quantum healing. What you're talking about is something called non-local correlation. And it has a vast body of literature on it. And if you stay tuned in the next 2 weeks on YouTube, you'll find actually my interview with a guy who used to be a spy for the US government, Russell Targ, where the US government, including the CIA, sponsored research on this and on non-local remote viewing and remote correlation. But here's an experiment we did at our own center. We did evoked responses. So we have two people who are emotionally connected. They're in love, or they're mother and daughter, or whatever. They have a close emotional bond. We separate them, and then we tell them that we're going to take you into deep meditation, and in that meditation we'll introduce the thought that we'll remain connected. Okay, so we'll introduce, and then we put them in separate rooms, and we surround them with what is called a Faraday chamber. Faraday chamber is a lead shield that does not prevent a signal going in or out. So your cell phone won't work in a Faraday chamber. Now we do something called an evoked potential. We take a flashlight and we shine it in one person's eyes, and their brain shows a response to the light. It's called an evoked potential. Lo and behold, the other brain in the other room, in a Faraday chamber, shows the same response at the same time, as if those two brains were the same brain. Now, because it's non-local, it's outside of space-time, it doesn't matter where these two people are. One could be in New York, one could be in Los Angeles, or one could be in New York, the other could be on the moon. It does not matter. Distance in space-time doesn't apply to non-local reality. That's what the Zellinger experiment is about right now. That there's a domain in the universe that's called non-local, outside of space-time, where everything is not only connected, because connection means a signal. It's correlated instantly. And that correlation is unmitigated, means the robustness of that correlation does not diminish with distance in space-time, or even past and future. So it's unmitigated, it's unmediated, there's no signal involved, and it's instantaneous. This is what Einstein objected to when he called this spooky action at a distance. And he died unhappy thinking about this, because the mathematics for this was already existent. Now Zellinger and others are actually proving that this is true.
It's amazing. Thank you.
So let's take one from this side.
Hi, Deepak. It's such an honor and privilege to have you here.
Nice to meet you.
And actually, I spent a lot of time in your center in Southern California, and especially working with Dr. Simon. Sure. So my sincere condolences on his passing. And I guess for me, with his passing and how much he personally helped me, I was just wondering on how you personally, in terms of spiritual solutions, worked through everything that happened with him, and how did you come to resolution?
Well, there were lots of things that went through my mind, because he lived an amazing life. And so for him to get brain cancer, and he was a neurologist, by the way. So here's a neurologist who diagnoses his own brain cancer and then dies from it in less than 20 months. And it was very difficult for me to reconcile with this because of all the things we teach. And so this is what I discovered. Now, I'm not saying there's a direct causal relationship, but this is what I discovered, and I'm glad you asked the question. When David was a child, he received radiation to his head and neck for tonsils. This is what happens with our medical profession. We think something works. Then I found out that in those days, they were treating asthma to burn out the mucus in the lungs with radiation. That if you went to get a shoe size, you would actually get an X-ray of your foot. So I, in my mind, now have chosen to believe that that radiation had a lot to do with it. A misguided system that looks things in isolation. For all these years, we didn't know that, but now we do, in hindsight. And David was a victim of that. Secondly, I, of course, went through the grieving process, which I still am. In the beginning, there's denial and anger, but then you must grieve. And then thirdly, I learned so much from him that those memories keep him in my awareness. So there you are.
Thank you. Hi there. When you were speaking about contracted awareness versus expanded awareness, it just struck me that maybe at a place like Google, people, that feeling of stress or the feeling of contracted awareness is kind of what actually drives us to be productive and efficient and to work fast. And I was just wondering if you had any words of advice of how to try to kind of achieve that more enhanced awareness, but still be kind of efficient and productive rather than...
I'd say start your day, and you're going to do a meditation class anyway, right? But start your day with 5 minutes of silence, asking very fundamental questions. Who am I? You don't need to know the answers. What do I want? How is this day going? What's the best way this day would go for me? Okay, and have a vision of how you want that day to be. Okay, and then ask yourself some deeper questions. You know, how can I create more joy for me and joy for the rest of the world? Because you have the technology to do it. That should drive you, and that will drive business in the future. Okay, that the number one trend in the world is well-being right now. The number one trend. But well-being is not just physical well-being, it's also emotional well-being, it's spiritual well-being, it's financial well-being, it's career well-being. It is social well-being. It's community well-being. If you take the holistic picture of well-being, you're in the best place to make that happen. Okay? From all the statistics I have, if you ask people in the world, how many people actually enjoy what they do? Only 20%. Only 20%. The rest of the 80% don't enjoy their work. That's a very dismal figure. More people die in our civilization on Monday morning at 9 o'clock than any other time. Okay, of heart attacks, which is an extraordinary accomplishment for which only the human species can take credit. No other animal has this ability. Okay? So knowing that, how can we improve our career well-being? How can we improve our financial well-being? These are very important things. And that comes from shifting awareness. So happy to work with you on that. Just letting you know.
It's fantastic, actually. Yes.
Hi.
So Google is a company based on search. Made quite a lot of money and changed a lot of lives by facilitating something where somebody can go and search for something that they are looking for. It's a choice. Analogous to all of us here today who made a choice to be here for whatever reasons based on your name, what we've seen of your history. And I think that indicates a certain, I don't know, collective consciousness about a willingness to be open to messages, a willingness to look at spirituality and things like that. What about all of the people who would never dream of doing that?
We can't worry about that. You know, there are people, everyone's at a particular stage of development, spiritual or in their awareness, and you can't worry about that. What I like is that we have a relationship now with YouTube, which is a Google offspring, I think now. And we are creating something called the Chopra Well. And we are going to be offering techniques for well-being, techniques for improving your financial and career well-being. As soon as I finish this, I'm going to do a hangout in your YouTube office right here in this building. And I think that's a sign of the times. This would not have happened 20 years ago. So there's something happening. And I think whether it's the Arab Spring or the Occupy Wall Street movement or the anti-corruption movement with Anna Hazare in India, this would not be happening in the absence of the social networks that we have. And so from search engine, which you have a big advantage of because you can access any information, we need to move beyond that, just searching the engine and harnessing collective creativity, collective intent. You know, there's a phrase, love without action is meaningless and action without love is irrelevant. But love in action, and that's our series here in New York, it can create miracles. So maybe you should adopt that as your mantra, love in action.
Thank you.
I'm understanding what you're saying as expanded awareness is just presence, and presence with yourself and connection with others, mindfulness. And you talk a lot about how information and awareness go hand in hand and how technology can help us with our expanded awareness. But what are the limits of technology and expanded awareness? I mean, for me, sometimes I feel like the information and the amount of information that technology enables prevents me from being present and mindful and leaves me, more interested in the social networks that you mentioned that can help us be aware than actually being aware about what I'm doing or the people I love are doing. So what are the limits?
Again, this is a very important question. So here are the simple answers to your question. Number one, technology is unstoppable. It's like the next evolutionary impulse in the evolution of human beings. So you don't even think about stopping it, okay? It's unstoppable. The capacity of technology is doubling almost every year, and information much more than that, okay? So in 10 years, the capacities that we have will be 1 million times more than we have. In 20 years, maybe 1 billion times. It's not even, you can't even imagine. So that's a fact, okay? Anybody who doesn't embrace technology, they're going to be not adapted, and according to Darwinian principles, which says those who don't adapt, nature lets them go, natural selection. Mm-hmm. So technology is unstoppable, we need to embrace it. Now, here's the main thing to understand. Technology is neutral. It's neither divine nor diabolical. It depends on how we want to use it. That means our state of awareness. So I always keep in mind, that technology, for me, is a means to expand consciousness. So I'm very selective about how I use it. And there are periods when you totally shut it off. So if you're having your meals, if you're with your children or with engaging in company, you put it away, okay? This is another thing we are learning through neuroscience, that your brain cannot multitask. It can only do one thing at a time, okay? At least consciously. Unconsciously, it's doing a lot of things, regulating your body, etc. So here's what I think, and I owe Daniel Siegel, who's a great friend of mine in the neuroplasticity business. He says there are different kinds of time. There's sleep time, there's play time, which is recreation time, there's relationship time, there is exercise time, there's mindful awareness time, and then there's focused work time. And you don't mix them. Okay, so when you are engaging in technology, just engage in that. When you're not, don't. And then you'll not be so overwhelmed.
Do you feel like through your research and through your just experience talking about expanded awareness, that's like a major hindrance to it now? Or just people being able to enter into being mindful?
It's always selective. People are... one of the problems with my audience is they've already decided that they want to expand their awareness. And if they haven't, they're not in the room.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And by the way, Dr. Dan Siegel actually did come and give a tech talk in Seattle at Google a few months ago, so his talk is online if anyone wants to watch it. I highly recommend it.
I would say his works, The Mindful Brain, and on mindfulness are very brilliant and very contemporary.
I agree.
He takes them out of the religious connotation.
Yes, very much. So I think we have time for approximately one more question.
Thank you. You hear stories about people who kind of experience death. They stop breathing, and for all intents and purposes, they've died, and then they come back to life. And you hear their stories of what that felt like and the peace that they feel. Is that kind of, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on that. Is that like the pure awareness? Is that kind of the next level? Have you heard stories of this? What are your thoughts on kind of the, the next level when people have these experiences?
Okay, first of all, there are lots of very interesting videos on that on YouTube, so check them out. Secondly, there are two schools of thought. One school of thought is that it's an experience of pure awareness, and that everyone actually to some extent has that experience as a near-death or post-death experience. There are other schools of thought that say that's brain damage. Okay, now I actually have had conversations regarding this. Some of them are also online with skeptics and with people who actually say, no, that's the real experience. That's real consciousness. And the problem is right now, and this is called the hard problem in sciences, and it's the most unanswered question in science today. How do you get an experience of being, right now you are experiencing yourself in your body, aren't you? Aren't you experiencing? Is everyone here experiencing themselves in their body? Well, there's no proof that there is someone there. We cannot scientifically explain an in-body experience. So try to debunk out-of-body experiences is kind of, should be the next step when we can't even explain an in-body experience. So the real research in science today, the unanswered question in science is, where is experience happening? So if I ask everyone right now to imagine a sunset on the ocean, do it. Can you see a picture? Where's that picture? If I go inside your brain, there are no pictures. Okay, there are just electrochemical impulses. So that in science is called the hard problem. We cannot explain consciousness. We're looking for it in the brain, we can't find it. We're looking for it in the body, we can't find it. And maybe we can't because we're asking the wrong question. Consciousness is not in your body. It's outside of space-time, where the real action is. And so that picture you saw is in a transcendent space. That's where we experience everything: sensations, images, thoughts, feelings. So my personal bias is that the near-death experiences are totally legitimate. There's a multi-hospital center trial going on in New York City right now, in 19 hospitals, where people are looking at what happens after death or near death, and they're coming up with the same experiences: a white light, a tunnel, feeling of peace, and all the other things that religious traditions have spoken about.
So we're just about out of time, but I wanted to give anyone off-site a chance to ask questions. I know we can't see you, so if you unmute and were to ask a question, then maybe we have time for an answer. Okay, sounds like nobody off-site has any questions. So with that, let's wrap up. Next, Dr. Chopra will be signing books. There's books being sold in the back here. And before you go, I want to remind you once again of the go/PGNY site. Check out all the fun things you could be doing for personal growth this month in New York. Thank you, Dr. Chopra, for joining us.
Thank you.